fan down on the air conditioner because I'm a professional. Today we are drinking delicious mango drink. It's all well and good having like a little screen above you, but I need to look there. I'm just too distracted by my own face. I'm like a canary, looking at a mirror. Hello, hello me. Hello you, hello me. MIFF 2021 was in August of that year, and my video about it was in October of that year. MIFF this year was also in August, and my video is in December. I fully expect this to spiral out of control until I'm making a MIFF roundup during the next year's MIFF. My cat's in here playing with my feet. She's so pointy. Come here. Come here, cat. She's biting my foot. This is a very similar video to last year's MIFF video. It's just the films I watched in the order I watched them. I watched way more than I watched last year, even though I went interstate to visit family for like a whole week of MIFF. Cat is fully just attacking my foot. Yeah, the thing about revenge is it rules and it kicks ass, actually. That's my professional revenge opinion. Saloum is a Senegalese fantasy western set during the 2003 coup d'etat in Guinea-Bissau. It follows a group of mercenaries who are transporting a drug dealer for ransom. Their plane breaks down and crashes, so they have to spend the night at a hotel where weird things are occurring. Just like a classic plot of figuring out who has what information. Like a lot of tension in sort of the first act and a half, is just who knows what. It's like, this character knows who this person is, but isn't telling this person. The police might be right behind them. What do the police know? Who's on whose side? Who's gonna rat them out to the police? Who's gonna do what? It's really good, guys. Just, you know, a really classic, really perfect setup for tension. The characters are also just really cool. Like the three main guys, the hyenas is the name of their outfit, and they just look so cool. Like they're introduced walking through a shootout, and they're really like casual and confident, and just like, they look so good. They look good as hell. Amazing. What I really love about genre films is that they have the capacity to engage with really dark and intense topics and subject matter in a way that is like fun and watchable, and that seems really contradictory, but like it's such an important thing that genre can do. Content warning, no going in that this does deal in child abuse. Like, I feel like this could be a really intense, dark drama about like the nature of abuse, the nature of healing, how do you move on when the worst thing that can happen to you has happened to you. But like, it is that, but also it's a fun fantasy movie where characters are getting up to like fighting fantasy creatures and greeblies. In combining those, it is no less serious or impactful. It's just that like, it's a movie that you're more likely to watch. Like, you have to be in the right mood for Revolutionary Road. There's movies that you only ever want to watch once, and then there's movies like Saloum, which you want to watch again and again because they're fun. I also really love seeing genre films from cultures where I'm not used to seeing that genre. Like, Saloum is stylistically a Western. I should point out that the director actually doesn't call it a Western. The director calls it a Southern, as in Global South. But like, structurally it does also like move quite a bit like a Western. And the Western traditionally is like very steeped in American culture. It's very, it's the American West. It's an American genre. And even a spaghetti Western, which is Italian, even a spaghetti Western feels American in some ways. But this is like, it feels so different, because it's like, what's a Western like in Senegal? It's like this. There was also an episode of Kill James Bond, the podcast, where they talked about it, and they had a guest who explained like a lot of the cultural context that I wasn't aware of going in. So I'd recommend that, just to get all of the background that you might not have. Also, this is a very actionable recommendation because it's on Shudder. Go get a free trial of Shudder and watch Saloum, and I guess some other things as well. I won't say much of what I thought of 300 Years of Longing because I wrote a review about it for like a website and stuff. I'm professional. No, I am actually a professional. Like, this is my profession now. I'm a professional, check me out. Oh yeah, got a skeleton and everything. The thing about being a professional is you do gotta have a skeleton. What I will say is that I did really like it, but I can see why a lot of people didn't. This seems like a movie that you'll either like or not. So structurally, there are some things I could see people not liking. Like, the first two acts definitely seem like they're building towards a third act that is very different to the one that we got. This is clearly a film that was made by people who have decades of experience. Like, it was directed by George Miller, like, a lot of experience behind the camera. Like, dude knows what he's doing. Has a whole crew of people who know exactly what they're doing. Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton, very good actors who have decades of experience, and they're all just having some fun with it. My favourite of George Miller's movies is still Fury Road. I think he's going to have to do something like really, really spectacular to unseat Fury Road, but this is still quite good. What I will bring up is some of the reasons why people didn't enjoy it, because I think they're like just interesting. Like, this is going to be as spoiler free as I can make it. But like, as I was walking out of the cinema, I was overhearing a conversation between two people who, like, they said that as soon as Alethea, who's Tilda Swinton's character, made her first wish, they just completely lost interest, because that wish made them like completely just lose any attachment to her. They stopped caring completely because they thought it was just so like unreasonable what she wished for. And their reasoning was sound. They said that it took away the agency of one of the other characters, and it did. Yeah, I would argue that the whole point of the movie is that that decision took away another character's agency, and that like the third wish would not be as impactful if the first wish wasn't what it was. Another reason I've heard is that the characters are like, they just keep making bad decisions even though they should know better, and it's like, yeah, they absolutely do. For me, that's kind of the point again of the movie, is that like these are characters who absolutely should know better, but they keep fucking up. Like, if Alethea hadn't whiffed it so badly with her first wish, her third wish would not have the impact that it does. And like, that's the point of the movie. Like, narratively, you have to see them make bad choices so that they can like progress. They're making the wrong decisions for the characters, which are the right decisions for the narrative. The Afterlight is probably my least actionable recommendation, because definitely see it if you can, but statistically you can't. This was a whole film assembled from archival footage in which like all of the actors on the screen have passed away. So from that limitation there came other limitations. So like, it's all in black and white, all the films are like from before 1960, and it's all in Academy ratio, they're like 4:3. So this movie exists as one 35mm print. No digital copies, no copies of that print. It is just one print that is going around whatever festival Charlie Shackleton is at. It also means that you're watching a film in the sense that you're watching a movie, but you're also watching the physical object that is a film. You're watching light pass through a film reel that is degrading in real time. If any other director did this, I think it would be unbearable. Like, Christopher Nolan wishes he could do it, but a Christopher Nolan Afterlight would be just insufferable. I would think he was such a wanker. I learned a bunch from the Q&A afterwards with the director, and he said that the whole movie was edited digitally and then printed to 35mm, and then the day before it premiered, he deleted all of the digital files. And when he said that, there was like gasp from the audience. It was very dramatic. So like, the fact that there's only one print of the film, and then after it wears out, it's gone forever, that gives it an incredible like fragility. It is very fragile in nature, but it's also like exists in a way that this director's other films don't. Like, it's physical, it takes up space, you can pick it up, you can move it, and you can't do any of that with like Beyond Clueless. So all the clips in the film are these like interstitial moments of like, you know, a character is walking from point A to point B, or they're like listening to music, or they're ordering a drink, and these are clips that are just kind of devoid of context. They're like, they're doing things outside of the main plot of the movie. So you'll get these moments like these, and they're like just completely taken out of context. There's zero context to be found in, like, so you'll have a character walking, but it's like, are they walking to somewhere? Are they walking from somewhere? Are they in danger? Are they being followed? Like, these are things that you don't know because they are so just separate from the plot of the film that they're in. We see these characters, and often they're the protagonists, but we're seeing them as we might see a stranger. It also means that like extras and like characters who only had one line, they are just as important as the stars of the movie. So like, you get sort of attached to these background characters, but like, there's distance put between you and protagonists. It's really fascinating. It familiarizes background characters and defamiliarizes protagonists. So like all of these characters are separated by like time and geography and genre, but they're all brought together through collage. Like there was a whole big scene in a bar, and like it was people in a German movie ordering drinks from a bartender in a Mexican film, and like there's a woman singing in an Italian movie, and she's like, the people dancing to it are all in American movies and Portuguese movies, and there's like there'll be bartenders, like waitresses in Japanese movies serving drinks to people in Brazilian movies. There's like this bit where like a bunch of people are sitting and listening to music, and the sound has all been replaced by a bird song. And during the Q&A, someone asked if that was a way to get out of like a copyright thing. And the director said that like there's kind of no way that copyright can be enforced on this movie. I think that the exact thing he said was, this film is very illegal. And it's just really interesting because it's like, you can't have a YouTube copyright strike against a movie that can't be uploaded to YouTube. While I was watching it, I recognized Humphrey Bogart and Peter Lorre, but slightly embarrassingly, all of the other names I recognized were in the credits. The credits were actually really kind of haunting, because obviously it was just a list of the actors in the order that they appeared, but it also had their date of birth and date of death. But some of them, their date of birth weren't even known. And it's like, these are people who contributed to film history. And film history is a very young history, but there's a lot of it. It's very wide. There's breadth. And like, these are all people who contributed to it, but no one wrote down their date of birth. Like, no one knew the year that they were born. So here they are, immortalized, but they're just like, also kind of anonymized in a way, like they weren't important enough, like they weren't Humphrey Bogart. So a lot of the footage that was used in the Afterlight was taken from sources like films where the only print that exists is like quite damaged, and it's been digitized, so the decay has been arrested and it's preserved in that form, and then like it's copied into into the Afterlight, where like it will also decay. It's like this incredibly present experience of the past. That's the kind of thing you can say when you're a professional reviewer, like me.
Cat! Catty cat, please stop eating my charger, you little shit. I love you. I love you, you small bastard.
So Moonage Daydream was composed of like archival footage, interviews, concerts, all constructing the life of David Bowie. Space. Can't stop myself. Bowie's in space. What you doing out there, man? Give me a cat. That's pretty freaky, Bowie. How far out are you, man? I'm pretty far out. That's pretty far out, man. So this film is very big. Like, it's a real hit-you-in-the-face movie. And, like, I'm so glad I saw it on the big screen. I saw it in IMAX, and, like, really, the correct way to interface with Moonage Daydream is to be blasted by it as if from a fire hose. So, like, as much as I would love a, like, comprehensive, informative documentary, the dude had 17 albums out by the time he was 33. So, like, I have this, like, multi-volume, in-depth documentary for the Beatles, and, like, that if you're going to do that kind of documentary for David Bowie, it would be too long. He did too much. Amazingly, for such a big film, it creates a very sort of personal and intimate portrait. And like, that seems very contradictory, but I think it needed to be as big as it was to make such a personal portrait. I've developed a sort of a scale for how to rank documentaries. First category is interesting subject, adequate execution. So these are documentaries where, like, the documentary's well made, it's perfectly good, but they're sort of coasting on how interesting the subject is. This is like Finding Vivian Maier, I think, was in this. Like, very interesting subject, coasting in execution. The next level is interesting subject, very good execution. So this is where the subject is interesting and the execution does a lot to, like, really foreground how interesting the subject is. You really like get the sense they're putting the effort in to make sure you understand how interesting this person is. Documentaries like the Sparks Brothers are this. So Moonage Daydream falls into a third category, which is interesting subject, interesting execution. So that is where the subject is very interesting, but the execution, the documentary, is itself an interesting piece of art. I would argue that like The Afterlight and Beyond Clueless also fall into that category. I am yet to see boring subject, interesting execution, but I would be fascinated. I have seen interesting subject, boring execution. That sucked. I've always liked David Bowie's music, and like I thought I understood him as a performer, but my interest was a very like greatest hits interest, and that's not to disparage that kind of interaction. It's just that like it's different to how I have liked other musicians. But like watching Moonage Daydream, this really gave me the sense of what David Bowie's music sounds like to people who are really, really into David Bowie. It's like, oh, I understand that fandom now. Moonage Daydream really gave the impression of David Bowie existing in multiple ways. Like, he is this big, larger-than-life presence, this, like, incredible performer on top of his game, but, like, also just a person who really, really, more than anything, wanted to stay part of the world. And, like, his fame and success gave him access to so much more of the world, so he could experience so much more of it, but because he was so famous, that fame and success also put a barrier between it.
Oh, cats.
Oh.
She threw up on my bed this morning, but I forgive her.
Vive L'Amour is such a, like, festival movie. This is so film festival. It was a sold-out screening in the middle of the day of a restoration of a Taiwanese new wave film from the 90s, in which not much happened. There is, like, pretty much no dialogue for the first 30 minutes. I loved it. The film was part of a, like, much larger restoration project. And so there was this, like, little bit, this little thing before it started, talking about the project, the restoration process. I said that, like, there was a lot in the film that they couldn't fix because they only had one reel and it was quite damaged. Mostly the visuals were really great. Like, it's really just, they did a good job of restoring it. Well done. It was a really fascinating and beautiful film to watch. The image did shake sometimes. Like, I'm not going to hold that against it. So vaguely the plot follows three people who are loosely connected to an apartment that none of them are really supposed to be in. There's the real estate agent who is selling the place so she has keys. There's a door-to-door salesman who steals a set of keys. And there's the guy the real estate agent brings back from one night stand, so he steals some keys as well. I was really impressed by how little dialogue there was. Like, the whole story is told through visuals and, like, just how characters relate to space and to each other. And, like, there are small moments where characters do have conversations, but none of the dialogue is expository. It tells a complete story, and I think it takes a lot of confidence as a filmmaker. Like, I spent a lot of it watching it and thinking, like, well, if I was making it, I would put some dialogue here, and that would be the wrong choice, and it would expose me as a hack and a fraud, and I would be run out of town, and that would be correct. I would deserve it. Even though nobody explains it, it's really a story about just the unbearable sadness that the characters are carrying around with them. And, like, there's no one event that, like, makes them feel that way or solves it. It's just kind of part of their lives and they just have to deal with it. That said, it's also quite funny. There are moments of, like, almost slapstick. Content warning if you're going to watch this movie, but there is a scene where a character does attempt suicide. And it's quite early in the film. And, like, that's, you know, it's a really tense moment, but then it kind of becomes funny because the character realizes that he's going to live, and also there are two people having sex in another room of the apartment he's in that he's not supposed to be in, and he doesn't know if they're supposed to be here. He can assume they're not, but he's not confident. So there's just this, like, real comedy of errors. A lot of humor is built out of, like, people in predicaments, and their predicaments just crash into each other. Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon is the latest from Anna Liliamapur, who also directed A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night and The Bad Batch, the movie, not the Star Wars. There's a similar theme running through all three of these movies, which is just, like, women learning how to navigate in hospitable environments. It's another supernatural genre film that uses genre to tell a story about a real world problem that would otherwise be a massive bummer. In this case, that problem is how people with mental illnesses are treated in society by institutions that are ostensibly there to keep them safe, and how those problems are compounded by gender, race, and class. Fun. So this movie has all of the elements of a horror movie, but it's not. So the plot is that Mona Lisa has been in a mental institution for her whole life, and then one night a blood moon unlocks her psychic powers, and she uses those to escape and go on a little bit of a rampage. In a lot of other movies, that's like the backstory of a villain, but in this case it's like, good for her. Mona Lisa could very easily be the villain of a horror movie. Like, she's an escaped mental patient, and people keep getting injured around her. But instead, the horror, like such as it is what has been done to her, and what will continue to be done to her if the police catch up to her. The character of the cop who is trying to catch up to her is, like, really interesting. He starts the movie trying to help her, but the only tool he has at his disposal is to arrest her. So she uses her psychic powers to injure him and escape, and then for him it becomes about revenge immediately. He justifies it to himself by saying that he is bringing a dangerous person back to, like, an institution that will contain her, but, like, his best case scenario is that she goes quietly with him back to a mental institution where she was being mistreated. Because yes, she did injure him, but her main crime is that she was not participating in her own subjugation. The power of community is a big theme in this movie. You gotta help each other, but not because you think you're gonna get something in return. The visuals are so good, like, they are stunning. There are, like, scenes of, like, just establishing shots where the sky has been altered in some way, and, like, so that you know that, like, some kind of supernatural doings are afoot, but, like, it looks so good. Holy shit, dude, what a movie. Ennio. This is definitely in the second of the, like, documentary tiers I told you about earlier, where it's, like, interesting subject, very good execution. It's a very straightforward documentary, but it doesn't coast on how interesting the subject is, and the subject is very interesting. It was a documentary about the very interesting life of excellent composer Ennio Morricone. It was also just, like, a fascinating look at, like, the history of film scores. So, like, the documentary points out that he wrote his first scores under a nom de plume, or I guess, like, nom de baton if you're a composer, like a conductor's baton. And when his mentor at the music school and all his music school friends found out, they all turned their noses up at it. But, like, these days, film scores are kind of the main way to make a living as a composer. I was also just amazed at, like, the breadth of his career. Because, like, to me, Ecstasy of Gold is, like, the Ennio Morricone score. Like, this is it. But, like, in the documentary, it was like, oh yeah, here it is. Like, first sort of half hour, 40 minutes, like, Ecstasy of Gold. Anyway, moving on. Morricone was, like, just a really important film composer, and just, like, probably one of the most important 20th century composers. Like, he was so important in the history of, like, film music and also of, like, experimental music and improvised music. Like, he had this whole separate career before he started doing film music. He was interesting, is what I'm saying. Dude composed over 400 soundtracks. That's as many as 40 tens. That's entirely too many. There was a year where he did 21 scores. Like, that's a new movie every, like, 2 to 3 weeks. Slow down. I would have really loved to learn more about just, like, the shitty movies that he composed scores for. Like, you know, obviously they did the big ones. They did, like, the Dollars Trilogy and The Mission and Once Upon a Time in America. But, like, there were a lot of shit movies, and I would have loved to know more about those. Because, like, the scores, like, they played bits and pieces of the scores, and they all sounded really good, and just... I want to know about the shit movies that have got a Morricone score. But alas, it was a 2.5-hour documentary with a lot of ground to cover. There was also a funny little anecdote at the start where he said he wanted to be a doctor, but his father sent him to music school. And that's funny because, like, that's the opposite of how that story usually goes. But also, Dad was right on this occasion. That's a massive W for the father of Ennio Morricone. Neptune Frost is an Afrofuturist science fiction musical about coltan miners making their way to a hacker collective. One of those miners is Neptune, who, the Wikipedia says that Neptune is intersex, but I interpreted them as, like, their gender being magically transed. It's either open for interpretation or I completely missed it. In any case, they're rolling with it. This movie is about so much. It is about technology and how it relies on exploited labor in resource-rich countries. It's about the history of East Africa. It's about technology that is at once so promising and holds so much limitless potential, but is mainly used for surveillance and selling data to advertisers. It's about how poor nations aren't coincidentally poor. Their wealth is being stolen and extracted from them, to the point where the people who mine metals that are crucial for the development of technology can't even afford a working satellite dish. It's about gender and sexuality and what has to happen to allow honest expression and what people do to repress it within themselves and within other people. It's about imagining a post-colonial future. It's about music that slaps. Once again, we have a genre film that examines and excises deep trauma and finds a way to move forward with it in a way that is fun to watch. That's a bit of a theme of this year, is genre films with sad themes. It looks cool as hell. It also just looks great. Just everyone looks fantastic. I had a great time just looking at it. So there's one character who's just a really good mirror to the rest of the characters of the Hacker Collective, including that character's sister. And his sister loves him and understands him, but also has to be the one to tell him that because of everything he's done, he is not welcome in a community that would have otherwise accepted him. There's something he can't accept about himself. It's kept vague what, but there's context clues. Because he can't accept this about himself, he hurts other people. He pretends he's a soldier, and he enacts this masculinity that he can't he thinks he's supposed to be like this, but he just can't be. He is the character who is the object lesson in how getting your shit sorted and how learning to accept yourself is also beneficial to the people around you. Give Me Pity follows a variety show that is going horribly wrong, but there is no way it could have gone right. So variety shows aren't really a thing I remember. The closest thing we really have today is Saturday Night Live. A variety show is a performer showing off everything they can do. It's singing, dancing, skits. It would just be this television hour and a half of this is them. Apparently Olivia Newton-John did one. Give Me Pity is the name of the TV variety show hosted by Sissy Sinclair, who has been trying for years and years and years to get this show, and she feels like she's finally made it. This is evidence that she's everything's going right for her as a performer because she has this variety show. That all of her insecurities are just sabotaging the show in the form of a potentially supernatural menace who is here to wreck shit. She just wants to be known and loved, but every time she starts getting personal, it gets way too intense, way too fast. All she really needs as a person is to be loved, but what she receives is a constant stream of unfiltered feedback. It'd be an interesting double feature with Black Swan, because it's this is sort of a version of Black Swan, but if Nina's goal is to get on Saturday Night Live. So much about the character is said through the fact that she's called her TV special Give Me Pity. You learn more and more about this character's life, and you realize that her life has been such that pity is the best she can hope to receive from someone. So there's a thing about performing where you do it because it makes you happy and because you get a kick out of making an audience happy, but to do it you have to run the gauntlet of very intense rejection and a lot of really personal insult. The nature of auditions is that there is one role and potentially hundreds of people auditioning for it, and even though that rejection might not be personal, it feels really personal every time. You might be auditioning for a role and you get rejected for it, and it might be because you're not good enough, but it might be because they've already cast another role, and for this character they want someone who's shorter than that person they've cast. Showbiz takes these creative people, these sensitive little freaks, and then just grinds them down with rejection after rejection after rejection, and then you end up with Sissy Sinclair. There's a bunch of cool technical details. I watched a Q&A with the director, Amanda Kramer, and she said there aren't really many of those old style, big TV cameras, and most of them are being used by Glow these days. So like the look they were going for, like they did most of it in post, and like as far as I can tell, it was really accurate. Like I think they did a really good job. There's just like this cool technical detail where she's always wearing these really shiny outfits with like a lot of like sequins and jewelry, but all of the like every like point of light creates an X on the stage, and like the screen is just overwhelmed with these crosses that are like trapping her on stage. That's what we call a visual metaphor. We did it. We got a sports documentary, and right there at the end I watched a sports documentary. I said this last year, but I don't like sports, and I don't like sports movies all that much. But I like a good sports documentary. So this was a documentary about Arthur Ashe, the tennis player, who, as far as I know, I think he was the first non-white person to win Wimbledon and the US Open. And he's still the only black male player to win, I've got it written down, singles titles at Wimbledon, the US Open, and the Australian Open. He, after his tennis career ended, he went on to be a dedicated and focused activist for, like, racial justice and AIDS treatment. Now, I'm a dipshit who knows, like, nothing about sports, but I still know names like Roger Federer, John McEnroe, Pat Rafter. Like, when I know the name of an athlete, it's probably because they're, like, really notable or exceptional in some way. Like, it's someone like Venus and Serena Williams who are, like, really, really, really good at the sport that they do. Or it's, like, someone who has a stadium named after them, like Rod Laver. It's someone like Novak Djokovic, whose off-court behaviour is notable in some way. Or it's someone like Margaret Court, who has been digging herself a PR hole and just doesn't seem to be able to stop. But anyway, Arthur Ashe was an exceptional athlete, very talented at what he did, and was like a very dedicated and focused activist. And I've never heard his name before. This was just like a fascinating portrait of like what pushed him towards activism, and like what sort of made him think he had to do things the way that he did, and how his opinions changed over time. So like you get to watch someone who is like arrived at a point, but you also get to watch how he changed and grew and like got to there, and like you got to see his opinion on feminism change over time. Like just really, it's a documentary that takes the time to explore the slightly more like messy and complicated things. I've said the word focused a few times, and like that is the one sort of the big theme of the documentary, is that he seemed very focused. Like whether it was like tennis or activism or parenting, it would just be like, okay, here's the thing, let's go, let's do this. It's definitely a very straightforward documentary, very well made. It's the interesting subject, very good execution one. Yeah, it did a very good job of like really organizing and sorting through a lot of information. Definitely not coasting on how interesting the subject was. Alright, that's what I watched at MIFF. I watched some shorts as well. I thought Pink Reef was fun. I thought Strange Country was fun. Alright, that's everything that I witnessed at MIFF. That was all of this year's MIFFs. Did you MIFF? Tell me what you MIFFed. And say hi to your pets for me.